human beings are an essential part of your line of defense. They're kind of your front line of defense if you think about it in that respect. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about the human side of cybersecurity?
Absolutely. The people in your business can be your best and your worst friend when it comes to security. So as you mentioned before about the number of just errors that lead to data breaches, everybody can make a mistake. And if you haven't put any gates or any sort of stoppers within your business to reduce the chances of that occurring, even if it's as simple as accidentally emailing the wrong person, but it happens to be with some quite sensitive health information or medical records, that can be a really big issue for your business. And that's where a lot of the data breaches come from, is those pure errors. But many of those errors can be stopped by just using the technology that you already have in your business and using the security features that are built in to that optimal level. You mentioned earlier on in the podcast around how security is built into many of the technologies these days, and that's absolutely correct. But what is unfortunately true is that for many of these technologies, those security features are not enabled out of the box. You need to actually go in and turn them on. And to do that, you need to understand what they're doing and how that's going to affect the way that you run your business. And so this is what we help a business owner to understand in terms of what features can they use that are already built into the technology that they use, how to turn them on, how that needs to change the processes within their business, how people can use them correctly. Because if you don't teach somebody how to use them correctly, it's likely to affect your productivity, let alone not actually end up introducing the security that is the whole point of turning them on in the first place.
That's exactly right, and it's a real conundrum in designing technology as well. You kind of have triggered a couple of thoughts around the kind of experience that that I've had over the years. So I take, for example, the two-factor authentication, which implicitly means that you're using a physical device in combination with a username and password, where all three of those things are known and exist to the person who's authorized. So a really simple example would be, I'm an authorized user, I have a phone, and so when I put my username and password into coreplus, it sends an SMS to my phone, and then that triangulates essentially that it's absolutely me that's doing it. Now, it's not 100% foolproof. Two-factor authentication is very strong. It's better than just username and password. But in time, really sophisticated hackers can find their way around that. And that's where human error can come into it, such as what you described earlier. Somebody could ring up and say, I need to change my phone number, for example, and then direct that code, that 6-digit code, to go to another device, and then they gain access to the system. So you still need to have the humans and the security interventions working together. The people side is really interesting. What I've observed on occasions in healthcare is that security is kind of inconvenient. Sometimes it's kind of like a grudge action, to activate the two-factor authentication or to de-identify data. I know a little while back we were de-identifying data that was being shared from coreplus to Xero, for example, with the view that healthcare information wasn't relevant to reconciling the bank account. And so a bookkeeper who needed to just tick and backtick money received versus unpaid invoices wouldn't really need to know what healthcare services were provided. And we got some real flack about it. That it was inconvenient that somebody had to feel as though they needed access to that information in order to do the bookkeeping task. And so we implemented a toggle that our customers could actually turn de-identification on or off. So the ideal scenario would be to have it on. That would probably rank higher in the cybersecurity score, to use your reference. But the perceived benefit of having that level activated versus the convenience of just knowing what service was provided, who it was provided to, in other words, the debtor, meant that the user actually created a lot of pressure to take security down a notch in order to have a much more usable experience. Do you observe that through your customers as well, where there's a resistance from team members?
Absolutely. It's something that has always been the case, and probably always will be the case, where there is a perceived opposition of convenience versus security. I guess there's a few things to unpack in that. First of all, I tell you what, it will be an even bigger inconvenience to a business, and that's going to be dealing with a data breach. So whether or not it adds an extra 5, 10 seconds, even 30 seconds to your day, it is absolutely worthwhile to avoid what is, as for most businesses, one of the worst days of their working lives, having a data breach. But secondly, it's about, and particularly when it comes to healthcare and allied health businesses, that the whole purpose of running a healthcare business is to help the lives of others, to improve health, to, they're inherently helpers. That is the entire industry. And one of the biggest risks for those people whose data and personal details are lost in a data breach then comes down to identity theft, which can be incredibly damaging on a personal level. So if you think about the inconvenience of introducing something like multi-factor authentication, which is incredibly effective against many attacks, versus the harm that could be caused to your customers and clients if you don't do the right thing and you do lose the data, I think it then becomes a very clear case of, well, obviously I'm going to do what I need to do to protect the data. There's also many research studies that have been released in recent times showing how customer and consumer perception is changing over time in terms of how they see how important is it to them to work with businesses that they can trust are going to protect their data. There's studies showing a very, very high percentage of people have said that they would not continue to use a business if they learnt that they had lost their data. And so that in itself that's changed drastically over the last 5 years since I've been involved in cybersecurity. 5 years ago, consumer sentiment was really quite different. It was like, it's not really a big deal. It's okay. She'll be right, the whole Aussie saying. But these days, that's just not the case. It really has transformed. I know me personally, and of course, it's one thing for me to say this, being a CEO of a cybersecurity company, but I would not continue to use the services of a business, no matter their size, if I no longer felt like I could trust that they were going to manage my data correctly. And this is now filtering through the entire wider community. So the age-old argument of, well, it's going to take longer, I need to do this easier, this technology is meant to make my business more productive, it just actually doesn't make sense when you sit back and think about what is best for my customers. And that's not always being able to provide a service 30 seconds faster.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I think the longer you're in business, the more you realize that those short-term gains could really add up and cause you a high degree of not just cost, your brand, your reputation, but then if you have to deal with authorities in the process, you've now lost control of your life because there's a third party who's intervening in your world to try and figure out what went wrong here and what happened. And healthcare is just one of those sensitive issues. I think it was only a couple of months ago in WA there was a data breach where the entire list of people who were being tested or suspected of COVID was by a 15-year-old was actually discovered and placed online.